You found the Rebirth podcast, and this is a chat with Kate. So it started last week as I was entered into a mastermind, and there's been this idea of having these like if you've been with Rebirth for a while, these conversations kind of morph off, right? That I have guests on, and then I also have speaking to you directly, and sometimes it was about resources, and sometimes it was about observations, and today is definitely um, not on the plan, but it's happening nonetheless. So two things. I had an odd dream last night, and in it, I was doing a video talking about God. And we can pause there and go back about at least 2 years, could be 3 years ago, where it was definitely, sometime between 2020 and 2021, that I know for sure, where I had this realization that, so background, I was born Catholic, always curious about spirituality and religion, self-motivated, reading about Buddhism, fascinated in Tibetan monks, wanted to learn about different alternate spirituality, always curious about, then that led to being curious about like land-based indigenous cultures and just seeing all of these different belief structures and being really impressed with I remember learning about my interpretation, if it's correct still, that in the Shinto religion in Japan, you could have like a religion that would meet and serve the people of the time in the temples, but the temples would remain. And so just learning all of these and the Vedic philosophy, and like for me, it all goes together. It just really all goes together for me. And I'm still currently reading, I probably will be reading for like 5 years, Paramahansa Yogananda's work on the second coming of Christ, where he looks at the Vedic texts and Christian texts, which have been very fascinating for me. So, okay, but let's go back to like 2.5 years ago, where I had this realization that, and I remember calling a friend and I was like, hey, like I'm good with meditating and I'm good, with the universe and I'm good with all of this, but like, do you talk directly to God? And my friend was like, I've never thought about it like that. I'm like, yeah, I don't know where this is coming from, but I can use every other word, but I'm not really comfortable using the word God or feeling like I have a direct connection to God. Yet I'm totally submerged in spiritual concepts and the idea of creator. And that started an inquiry for me. And if you're like, wait a minute, I've been listening to you for a while, that can't be true. And it's like, well, it's not like I didn't believe. It just was, I noticed I couldn't use that. I mean, I know why I couldn't use that one word. And I extrapolated it out to being raised Catholic. I kind of felt like, and I've talked to other people in my generation about, we were kind of told like, somebody was crucified for you. What more do you want? So I just left everybody alone, like I don't want to ask for anything more. I don't want to ask for anything more. And then, so anyway, so raised in that. And then this is going to be left open-ended. If you're like, what is going on with this podcast? It's like, there's just too many serendipities happening right now. And I'm going to do another one on abundance and about what that really is in a different episode. So I remember it's like this. I was having this talk with another friend. The more you grow, the more the whispers need to be worked through. The more the fine cracks in the veneer, which would have been totally like, you ever see like something that has like a little chip in it, but it's like not really a chip, like maybe it's a scratch, and that would have been fine, but then all of a sudden it's not fine. Like that's what I'm talking about when I'm using the word God. Like I mean that spent a lot of time on the internal development, and then I realized there was like this one little hitch, and so I went around it. And a couple of years ago, I realized that I was kind of going around it. And as a body worker, anything you're not inhabiting is drawing away energy. It's not allowing you to be in full possession or embodiment. And so then I went on this little journey to make friends with really, I started to realize that I was cool with like every deity, every story, except for the one that I was raised in. And there's obvious reasons being raised in the Catholic Church. So I thought, well, let me just at least investigate why I am so against it. And I did. And it's an evolving process, but the high note is that I repossessed the word God. And I realized for me that it had been affiliated away from me. It had been affiliated with atrocity. It had been affiliated with exclusion. It had been affiliated with things that I wasn't like wanting to be a part of. But then the problem is that I wasn't allowing myself to be inclusive and whole in the things that I was thinking. Okay. So that was the conversation I had a couple of years ago with myself, which then led on to a journey that lasted a couple of years, is what I'm saying to you. Then I had this dream last night about talking on a video about God. And then I get on YouTube from an alert that J.P.Sears, the spiritual comedian, new age comedian, just did a whole talk on how he changed his mind about God. And I'm listening to this talk and I'm like, interesting. Some of the same keynotes. And then I go into the comments and I'm reading. I'm like, some of the same keynotes. So you know what I thought was, well, then I don't have to do the podcast. I don't have to say anything. And the silence that followed was like, oh, really? I was like, oh, yeah. I think this is a time right now in the evolution of spiritual consciousness that it's like the smallest whispers can create major change. And the reclamation, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm telling you that I made a promise to myself to speak into this microphone about it. And I was met with like immediate serendipity. And then there was like this resistance of like, well, it's not really necessary for me. And listen, I hear that all the time with writers. Well, I won't really write the book that fill in the blank. Or I want to start a business too, but I don't really have and it's like, it's some of the helpful mentors that I've worked with in business have actually said, oh, somebody else is doing it? Great. That confirms the market is interested. I was like, oh, that's a much more abundant thought. Oh, that confirms the validity of my offer, the validity of my inspiration. Now I just need to assign the worthiness of my participation, of my piece of the puzzle, of my voice being heard, of my book being written, of my business being started, of me being comfortable to live within the lines of my own spiritual concepts. Because listen, we are definitely in an era of consciousness shifting. And if that is something you're intrigued about learning more on, I would start saying read some Rudolf Steiner. That's been really helpful for me. Paramahansa Yogananda, always helpful. What a brilliant writer and conduit of the word, capital W. I mean, I'm always reading about stuff like this. And that's also when I'm like, well, you know what? I'm always reading, but what am I doing? So that's also, I think, why the idea of using the voice, using the voice. And I've said at the end of interviews with other people on this podcast, like, hey, if you guys like it, share it, and let's choose with our energy and our focus and the like button and the subscribe button to affirm what we want to see more of. And it's like, well, I want to see more people that believe in their worthiness and feel aligned with their belief structure of their divinity. Because a friend recently shared a Steiner quote about, love can fix anything. You can have divergent opinions. Please, let's have divergent opinions. Please, let's have divergent food and keep people off of the idea that we all need to be eating bugs. And let's have divergent thought. But it doesn't mean to suppress another. It doesn't mean to eradicate another. And I think the concept of God has been extrapolated away from its origin to mean suppression. And, I didn't watch all of J.P.Sears' video, but he's echoing what some of my friends who are more in structured religious atmospheres are like, I'm not throwing including my mother, who I'm sure is listening, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And this is the structure that works for me. And it's like, I think there's been a lot of, we didn't agree with some things, but instead of building something different, we moved away from. And, whatever you want to see more of, I hope you're building it. But I definitely want to be in a world where resonance, like that's how I run. I run on resonance, I run on, this feels good to me. This person feels like a connection point to me. I don't understand this, but this is something that I'm moving forward to. That is from working on my internal tuning fork. You know what I mean? And children have it if it is not squashed. So that's a part of our brilliant design. That's a part of the human design. And not all of us come in to form in the same way. And not all of us are given the freedom to keep that system intact. And many of us have to reclaim it. And I think that's part of the design as well. But I guess this one chat is about not eggshelling around the word God. I'm in a mastermind right now. And I think part of the reason that I am getting so much out of it is because I know the person that is guiding this, her concept, she's like, okay, it's all God. Like, I mean, you can make $1 million. It's all God. Like, what's and it's like, so around me also in the serendipities, all of these structures of life, because if you're listening and you're the starving artist or the starving healer or whatever, the whole thing was supposed to be that we got to do our purpose and we are here to serve. And the trade-off for that in the current world we live in is that we're supposed to struggle. Well, I try not to swear because I have so many, I try to listen to podcasts that I don't have to delete on the, but it's malarkey. And there is a surgence happening that those that are here to serve, and I don't care how you serve. I don't care if it's making cheesesteaks, books, bookkeeping. I don't, whatever it is that you're here to do, we can thrive. And our concepts of thriving are different. But I'm for sure know that if we rely, here's what's happening for me. The dreams I have, I can't really do them completely on my own. And that used to frustrate me. But now what's turning for me is understanding I'm not supposed to. And take that to mean whatever you will. Partially, it means others and a community, and partially it means opening up to a source that is greater than I, that knows all the players, can align the highest good. And, I can get more into these concepts, and I do in some of my classes, but that's not what this is about necessarily. It is about, though, is maybe there's things that we've been shying away from that is actually what we want to be leaning towards. To be building back an earth that we want to see, and that we could be doing reclamation of our divine selves, our divine spark. When I see somebody that has a twinkle in their eyes, that's what I think of. Like, oh, you're here. You are here. You're not wishing you were somewhere else. You're not in your anger of what didn't happen. I'm sure those things happen, especially if I meet someone that has that spark and they're older. All those things happen, but you are here. And that is the best part of being human. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope it helped you, and I'll see you back here next week. Thank you for tuning into the Rebirth Podcast. If you enjoy these stories and ingesting inspiration because you understand that what you bring into your field magnifies your field, go on over to Amazon and click on Rebirth, the book, and bring it into your home and share it with your community.